Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 588, the pre-show. This is for April 24th, 2017. Yeah, back to the wire in my ear. Forgot to bring my fancy little wireless ear pods, but that's okay. We are here, and Bill Murray is here.
Yes.
Like Bill is, say something.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Sounds like you're on your
Nothing?
bad mic. Sounds like the internal
hang on a
mic,
sec.
maybe.
Hang on a sec.
Just like Bill
Let's
is
try
live
this,
from the
James.
local.
Is that better? Is that better?
Tap on your mic. Yeah, that's it.
Not see. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I'm coming to you from Ardmore, Oklahoma tonight.
That's a nice looking kitchen you got back there.
Isn't it? Would you like me to microwave you something?
I'll pass. I like this thing, Brian. I'm just gonna hold this thing up the whole time, and I'll leave.
Yeah, you could just fall asleep, James. Just tape that up there.
There you go. Tape it to the microphone. Let's see.
There you go.
Boy, James looks happy tonight.
Oh, yeah. I got to figure out a way to get this thing in here.
All right, I've invited our guest.
We had 100 James Spans at Walker County last week.
Brian's lost his voice.
Yeah, it's pretty thin.
Were you yelling at the race or something, Brian?
I really appreciate you doing that Sunday night show. That saved me, man. Goodness, this weekend was a blur. You
are welcome.
I mean, I should never have this much fatigue on a Monday. This is not good. But, we just keep on keeping on here. We'll carry out. Or Aubrey says she can't make it. Are we the only three?
I think it's time to recruit a new panelist.
Yeah.
We need a regular attendee. All right. Hey, James, are you down for this thing Friday at Vestavia? Just making sure it's on your calendar. Communications Day.
Vestavia Central, 9:00.
You the man. Thank you.
I'm there.
They're so excited.
I got to go do this. I got to do this big thing at Honda tomorrow. I've never been to the Honda plant.
Ooh. Maybe you'll get a free car.
What it is. I'm not going to hold my breath. Did you guys get some weird error message on the Hangout that said this app cannot be loaded?
Yeah, it was Control Center.
I thinking, what's going on? I changed browsers and everything, and I couldn't make it go away. So, but then it dawned on me that it's not really affecting Hangout itself.
There's a little X in the right-hand side of it that I clicked and it went away. What are you sharing there, Brian Peters?
Supper.
What?
Is that your dinner?
That was supper tonight. Dinner.
Looks pretty interesting.
What you got in there, Brian?
Scrambled turkey, tomatoes that were just redder than you can believe, corn, fresh corn off the cob, and peas.
This is sounding like a new. What did you have for dinner tonight, Brian?
Yeah, see, Brian brings pictures. That's good. So let's see here. Let me be sure I got my audio routed.
The science is in. Science.
Y'all heard that, didn't you?
Yes,
we did.
Okay.
Have you sent Bill Nye a congratulatory telegram or something? Is that all I get? Is just the buzzer?
hey, James.
This is the second monster.
Yes.
Was it Mike Massimino who was our keynote back in Birmingham at NWA?
Man, I can't remember what happened yesterday, much less 6 years ago.
The astronaut. Who was the astronaut we had?
It was an astronaut. Brian, you were there.
Yeah, from the guy from UAB, right?
Right.
That wasn't his name.
Okay.
I'm having a blank with his name at the moment, but that was not it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. You would know. I don't know why our guest is not joining us. This is not good. He just called me.
Larry DeLucas.
That's it.
That's right. That's right.
Larry DeLucas. Thanks to the
remember that to save my
Google
life.
for fixing that.
Yeah, I stole one of his pictures from the shuttle with his permission.
All right, neighbor. I sure feel like I have not done something here.
Make sure you push all the buttons.
Yeah, I mean,
I have about 35 satellite-related questions. Can I just ask y'all if our guest doesn't show up?
Sure.
See how many y'all get right out of 35?
Like an exam.
Yeah.
That would be a short show, wouldn't it, James?
I was hoping to have Rick on tonight so we could talk about this severe weather that's expected in here on Friday. Because I would like to know whether I need to stay another day.
Oh, here is not Birmingham. Sorry.
Yeah, here is Oklahoma.
Yes.
Yeah, we got Thursday to worry about. Looks like everybody's out speaking somewhere, but
that didn't look like much on Thursday. Do y'all agree or disagree?
The surface-based cape on the NAM, which, you know, you might question using that, but the 84-hour output of the NAM had the surface-based cape at 3,500 in Birmingham. That's the highest of the year.
Wow.
And the STP at a 4 just east of Birmingham. Is
Bill,
always use it with caution, but it looks like it might be an active day.
And Bill, I have to remind you, I didn't think Saturday was going to be a severe weather day either.
Yeah, boy, that was that's an interesting case study in
yes,
in social science and physical science. I wrote and I'm so stinking busy. It's like I don't have time to think, but I felt like I needed to write an essay because all I heard all day Sunday, we got no warning. Didn't hear a warning. Weather radio didn't go off. My phone didn't go off. Got no warning. You know, you guys are knuckleheads.
That last one's true.
Yeah, that we are knuckleheads. But you know, in the tornado warning, you know, was issued after the thing got down. That's the way it works with these small ones. And
yes, it
was issued 4 minutes before it dissipated. And of course, by the time it was disseminated, it was probably all dissipated. But I think we need to do a better job of talking about our limitations. And hello to our friends watching on the television side. Yes, we are live on cable television. So, Brian, quit cussing, please.
Okay. By the way, speaking of Saturday, did you see the garbage that was being put out in some of the polygons?
No.
Oh, my gosh. Polygons that weren't even going in the direction of the storms.
Really?
And I don't mean 10 degrees.
Yeah, they were severely right moving, but some of the polygons made no sense out of Memphis. I just was
Well, I wasn't going to say Memphis, but you're right.
All right. For our friends at the Weather Service in Memphis at 1-800-BillMurray.com. Please call him, not us.
First two I would put up against my statement clearly. I mean,
yes.
One of them was pulled immediately. It almost like it was a mistake. It had to have been a mistake.
Well, the direction. I mean, it was quite obvious those storms were right turning.
Yeah, no question.
Before the warnings were issued.
Right.
It was almost as if somebody was asleep at the wheel, is what it looked like.
Yeah, that one that got pulled right after it was issued had to be it was replaced with another one. It had to just been a fluke of some sort.
So, Brian, this WeatherBrains 101, don't roll this. Is this the old one from last week, or what is this one?
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
When an updraft begins initially, that's last week's.
Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah, I tried recording, and it sounded so bad, I just didn't want to put it out.
Well, let me see if I've got the astronomy, Tony's thing here right. Hang on. WeatherBrains. What show is this? 5.8. This is 588.
Yes, 588.
So Tony uploaded one today at 4:42. Well, he was on the show last week, so yeah, this is probably the right one.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Last week, the Cassini probe began the final phase.
He put it in the box for this show, so I'll run that. It's not, I'll be in trouble. So, wow, we have no panelists and no guests. Me and you, Brian, and Bill.
And Bill.
You got no voice.
Yeah.
I've got no face.
We'll have a guest here shortly. Don't worry. Never fear.
2.3 members.
We never fear. We always get this show on the air. We'll make it happen.
I could call for laryngitis cures.
So, yeah, man. I mean, you started losing it when
Thursday
after the because you were sounding raspy after the spotter training, and
yes, and it's been thin ever since.
Wow. I'm not going to have any joy in your misery because it could easily happen to me. For those of you just tuning in on the television side, we are 3 minutes late. We typically start the show about this time. We're going to get our guest on the line here in just a second. Do I need to invite him, Bill? Bill put some information in the chat room here. Let me invite him. I just invited him. And we'll see if we can get him on here. If not, we'll just talk about the warning process. Here he comes.
Right.
Yes. All right.
I think I heard him.
Not seeing him, but we're hearing him.
All right. Just got a letter for me on my screen.
You're in Avatar, Sean.
Let's see here. Okay, there's a little setting here.
Oh, yeah. Bingo. We have a winner. Let's get this thing going. Stand by. I'm going to get the recorders going here.
Are we sure he is who he says he is?
Yeah, let's check your driver's license.
We checked his passport on Saturday.
Yeah. All right. Recorder number 1 for track 1. Let's record track 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 588, the weekly show all about weather. This is James Spann. Hey, thanks for joining us. This is late April, the core of the tornado season for some of us down here in Dixie Alley. April 24th, thank you for taking the time to watch and or listen this week. Looks like we're kind of thin staffed this week. Brian Peters and even our regulars that are here are struggling. Brian, your voice is... what, 62% or 42%? How much you got?
I'd give it about 42%, yes.
Yeah. I'm saying this is busy. I mean, goodness gracious. We're coming off a weekend. Traditionally, I feel pretty good on Mondays. I've had a little bit of rest over the weekend, but this weekend was a blur. I mean,
absolutely.
We were all just busy. Brian, you were out at an IndyCar race all weekend long.
And weather wasn't not exactly a big issue, but it was a constant concern the whole time, all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, no kidding. So how does that work at these IndyCar races? How long does it take the track to dry out before they can run?
They don't have to have the track dried to run.
It's in the rain, don't they, Brian?
Yeah, I think they do. As a matter of fact, the track was wet, but the rain had stopped, and the Indy cars got out there, and they had some pretty cool rooster tails coming up behind them when they first started going around the track. But yeah, I think the thing is they do take weather into account and try to decide whether or not to postpone or delay to avoid weather issues.
Okay, well. So you had a busy time out there, and I was at a college football game Saturday. I don't think I watched a single play. These spring games. It's the spring game, and so I got out there, Brian, and I was out there. I was going to sign these things, these little head on a stick things, and as I was getting out of the car, the guy texted me and he said, "We got a line for you guys out here," and I thought he was joking. Typically, you know how it is. You go to these tents and you meet people and take some pictures. I got to that tent. There was a line. It was like Space Mountain at Disney World.
Oh my gosh!
You couldn't see the end of this line. And of course, it wasn't for me. It was for the guy with me was a former Alabama Crimson Tide football player, and he plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. And these collectors and autograph people, that's a big deal. But I was in the middle of all that, and we stayed out there 30 minutes beyond our time and barely made it back in the stadium to do the weather duties we had to do. And then about the time I wrapped up that mess, we had severe weather Saturday night. And then Sunday, I had to work a shift at the TV station here, had some extra stuff at church, and it was just an absolute blur. And Brian, thank the Lord, covered for me last night on the late news because I was dropped. I had nothing left. So, Brian, I owe you a big one. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's because I did the Weather Extreme videos for him, James. He was rested.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I had to head out.
So, James,
I had to head out to Barber Motorsports so early that Bill graciously handled those Weather Extreme videos, or I would have had to get up about 3 a.m. And the problem with that is there's no data at 3 a.m.
Yeah, we got to bust our weekend weather person's chops here. Our weekend meteorologist, Megan, Brian, where she just ran out on us.
I don't know.
Number one, in the middle of tornado season, you don't take any time off in tornado season and weather. It's like there's no crying in baseball. There's no vacation during tornado season. And she abandoned us, and she went to some prom or something, and here we were with all this mess, and now we're a wreck. So
yeah, it's all her fault.
Anyway,
blame it.
All right, Bill Murray. Bill is coming from the Roach Motel tonight somewhere in East Aboga, Nebraska. And for those that are not watching, and a lot of people that listen to the show don't know we have a video version, but I'm trying to see what's behind you. I see see paper towels, coffee maker. Wow, stove, refrigerator. That's a nice looking. That's a nice place. Wow, very nice.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm equidistant between Kevin and Rick tonight, so I'm in the middle of Oklahoma.
All right, well, bring in our guest here. Let's get this show
James,
on.
I need to know the pronunciation of the new freshman phenom quarterback at Alabama. How do you pronounce his last name?
I have no earthly idea. I didn't watch any of the game. I don't even.
I have no idea, and I watched the entire game. So anyway, he's from Hawaii. So, so tonight's guest, WeatherBrain, is the chair of the American Meteorological Society Board on Enterprise Economic Development under the AMS Commission on Weather and Climate Enterprise. He's also an engineering fellow with Raytheon Intelligence and Information Systems in Aurora, Colorado. Dr. Sean Miller, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we're so thrilled. I love, when I was growing up, I loved pizza buffets, Dr. Miller. So I feel like I'm at a satellite buffet tonight. I really invited you to be on to talk about the AMS Washington Forum, and we're going to talk about that. But, when I learned a lot about your background, I thought this is going to be a great opportunity to talk satellites tonight. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. Love to talk about that.
Well, I'm right now in the middle of, reviewing with a team of reviewers abstracts for the National Weather Association annual meeting, and there are probably 250 abstracts. And by my count, 16 of them had the word "goes" in them, and 8 had the word or the initials JPSS in them. So just those two alone probably represent 20 or 10% of the abstracts that we have to review. So there's a lot of attention on satellite. Probably a good time to be a satellite meteorologist, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Those two programs are both in exciting times. GOES just launched back in November, the GOES-R series, and the first JPSS satellite will go up this September, although the NASA Sumi NPP satellite carries pretty much the same instruments and has been up for a few years now. So pretty excited to see another one of those go up.
It really is exciting. So, we asked last week, and we didn't have a real answer. When will the GOES 16 become operational, do you estimate?
I cannot remember what the date was. Typically, especially with a new series like this, where all the instruments are brand new, it takes a little bit longer. Once you've got something that's been up before, it's probably about 90 days to get everything up and running and operational, but I would expect GOES-R still needs some more time before that happens. Could take a year even for something with that many step changes in technology. So
how many satellites are in this series, Sean?
And GOES-R.
Yeah.
That one is nominally for RSTU. Those kinds of considerations are always subject to what happens to the budget over time, of course. But I know GOES-S is not too far away in terms of launch. I'm not sure which year, but it's sooner rather than later.
So about how many years will these satellites be effectively in operation?
Oh, typically you're talking 5 to 7 year design lives for these satellites. But they're so, I won't say over-designed, but so much engineering goes into making sure that nothing goes wrong once they're up there that they often last quite a bit longer than the design life.
And so you talked about budget considerations. About what does one of these cost? And, were there some things that you had to go in and take out of the satellite to get it to fit within a budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Both GOES-R and JPSS are multi-billion-dollar programs over a course of 10 to 12 or however many years it is that you fly the series. That includes the ground system and the operations staff and sustaining the system. So a lot of it is on the back end, but there's hundreds of millions that goes into the instruments and the spacecraft up front as engineering, just because once you get those things up there, you can't go up there with a screwdriver and fix something. It's got to keep running for a decade. So
we hear about terms like VIRSS. Tell us what that is, Sean. What does that mean?
VIRS is the Visible Infrared Imager Radiometer Suite. So if you guys want to have a quiz at the end of this.
I proposed that and they turned me down.
Bingo.
If you hadn't shown up, that's what I was going to do. I was going to ask them 35 questions and see how many they got right.
There you go. So that's an instrument that's actually built by Raytheon Space and Airborne Systems. The first one has been flying on the Sumi NPP satellite since 2011. And it's a pretty big advance, kind of like GOES-R. The NPP and JPSS instruments are big advances over their predecessors. In the case of VIRS, you have quite a few more channels than we had before in that orbit. In the visible and infrared, much higher spatial resolution across the entire scan. It's designed to where even as you start looking off nadir, you're able to keep your spatial resolution very high. And it's also got what's become kind of a superstar as the day-night band on VIRS, which gives you the ability, as the name suggests, to get imagery day and night, whether it's illuminated by sunlight or by moonlight. Or even we've found the instrument is so sensitive it can pick up auroras and day glow off emissions from the atmosphere. So it's a pretty amazing instrument.
So will we eventually get some benefit from nighttime visible satellite imagery? And what would that be, Sean?
Yeah, we already are actually. The Department of Defense had an instrument called OLS that's still flying on their DMSP satellites, and that's been flying for a few decades. But it didn't have the range that this new instrument has. So there's always been the ability to track city lights and trends in those. You can see at this resolution, you can see fishing boats, collections of fishing boats have enough light to show up in the imagery. Interesting thing that happened with Superstorm Sandy is VIRS data from day-night band were used to kind of do a comparison of where the lights were on the day before and where they were off the day after. And that was actually used as guidance for people trying to figure out, okay, where do we need to restore power?
Wow, that is really cool. So it sounds like we're getting back to the predictions in the 50s. There were fears when the satellites went up that people would be able to be tracked by the satellite. Sounds like we're not far from that now.
Well, we have other satellites up there that can do that much better, but can't tell you about it.
Uh-oh, too much information here.
There you go. Yeah, we're crossing the classified entry there. That's not a good idea. So you talked about VIRS. Talk about the Advanced Baseline Imager and Ground System. What does that really mean, Sean?
The Advanced Baseline Imager, that's on GOES-R, and it's very similar to VIRS. It's a visible infrared instrument that's collecting data and more channels, more frequently, and at higher spatial resolution than its predecessor. So between JPSS and GOES, you're getting a real flood of data that's orders of magnitude larger than what were being sent down before by predecessor satellites.
So does that create some problems when we try to get these products into the field, Sean?
It's a challenge for sure. It's really kind of what drives the ground system in many respects, because first of all, you have to have pipes on the ground that are big enough to move that data from one spot to another. But you also have to have the right computing capability to be able to crank out the data products that are really what are used by the users at the National Weather Service and others. So it's a major driver for the engineering.
So when you talk about these satellites, like our new GOES-16, GOES-R series, and Japan's satellite and the new JPSS, where does that put us in the satellite arms race right now?
That's an interesting question. The United States and Europe, I would say, are still probably the leaders in these types of satellites in terms of meteorological, environmental satellites. But you're seeing a lot more countries getting involved all the time. So you mentioned Japan; they've been in the game for a while, so they're quite good at it. The Koreans have become more active in it. We're seeing. I've heard about Russia and India and other countries in that part of the world speaking in longitude terms, wanting to get something up there. So it's becoming more of a global collaborative effort, and the technology is becoming more available, I think, to more and more nations to be able to launch these kind of satellites of their own, which of course is part of, any country would prefer to be able to have their own assets that they can control for that purpose versus having to rely on others. At the same time, everybody's facing budget crunches, so being able to collaborate internationally is important as well. And in the case of JPSS, that manifests itself very, very nicely in terms of you kind of need a constellation of these satellites to get global coverage for the global weather models. And so NOAA and the DoD and EUMETSAT for Europe have been collaborating for several years on running that constellation.
So is that why the polar orbiting satellites like JPSS will be important?
Absolutely.
Or are important?
Yeah, it's in terms of with weather forecasting, you always have to start, you kind of start at the highest scale, the global scale, and then you scale down to regional models, and then, finally to the models that tell you what's going to happen in your specific area in a forecast. But it all starts with that global model that describes how everything is circulating. And in order to get a good picture of that, you need a constellation of satellites that get you data every 4 hours or so on a given spot, more frequently as you get closer to the poles. And so that constellation really needs to be maintained moving into the future.
So we've been hearing about GOES-R for a long time. As a matter of fact, when we had our NWA meeting in Birmingham in 2011, we had a GOES-R seminar at the end of it, or conference at the very end. You don't hear as much about JPSS. Is there a reason for that? Or are we going to hear more about it in coming months as we get closer and closer to GOES-R becoming operational?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons. Certainly GOES-R has had the spotlight because of the recent launch, and rightly so, with the technology that it's carrying and the advancements that it's enabling. JPSS and other polar orbiters probably suffer from being more behind the scenes a little bit. A lot of the data that come from those satellites goes directly into the weather models, but you don't necessarily see the pretty pictures as often as you do with GOES-R. So for example, when you're watching the weather forecast on your local news channel, if they show a satellite feed, it's probably a GOES satellite that you're looking at. And that's important too, because that's the satellite that gives you the rapid update of what's happening right now, whereas the polar orbiters are there to tell you what may happen up to 3, 5, 7 days from now.
So are there things on JPSS that aren't on GOES by necessity, or just because that's the way it is, or are they pretty much the same?
There are a couple. There's an ozone instrument on JPSS because it flies over Antarctica, for example, every orbit. So that can take observations related to that. JPSS also has a couple of sounding instruments, a microwave instrument and infrared instrument that allow you to get a profile through the atmosphere of temperature and moisture. GOES satellites have traditionally also had a sounder, but it's been at far less resolution in terms of being able to just delineate the atmosphere. And GOES-R ended up without having a dedicated sounder instrument at all. And we talked earlier about tough decisions related to budget cuts. That was a kind of a victim of that.
So I hear a lot of excitement about the Lightning Mapper. That one seems to be getting a lot of attention. Talk about that for a second, Sean. Yeah,
that's always been one of my favorite instruments of these new ones going up, just because there's been really nothing like it. The TRIM satellite, this Tropical Rainfall Measuring Mission for NASA, flew over the tropics for well over a decade, I think, and had an imager like that on board. But it was only in that part of the world, and it wasn't able to take constant snapshots at very, very high frequencies. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we learn about that and what sort of new correlations we can derive, and maybe come up with some new ways of telling what's going to happen with severe weather when you combine that with the imagery and the other things that GOES-R has at its disposal.
So is there anything from ground arrays that is similar to what we'll have from the Lightning Mapper, or is it two different things?
It's really two different things. There's networks, pretty extensive networks for measuring lightning from the ground. But one of the things we don't understand very well is how well that correlates with lightning at the top of the clouds, which is typically what the Lightning Mapper is going to see from geo-orbit. So it'll be really interesting to see to compare those data sets and see just how correlated they are, if there's patterns and how one translates into the other, and so forth.
So it seems that it can detect both cloud to ground and intra-cloud, but can it separate between the two, Sean?
I think they'll be able to do that. Yeah, I'm not as plugged into the latest science on that, but I suspect that just by looking at the different patterns because when you look at GOES Lightning Mapper imagery, you'll be able to not only figure out what's going over some spatial extent, but you'll be able to learn a lot about how the pattern propagates over time. The instrument's really cool in that way because it can measure so rapidly that you can actually see how an entire flash is propagating, not just over space, but over time. And I suspect that has differences between, cloud top and cloud to ground.
So how does the Lightning Mapper work, Sean? Is it visibly seeing it, or is it measuring electromagnetic radiation? What's it doing?
If I recall correctly, it's looking in the very, very near infrared, so almost visible, but not quite, if I recall the band correctly. And it's just looking for emissions in that particular band. They picked that because of, combination, as usual, a combination of trying to minimize the effects of the atmosphere in between, and picking something that's going to give you a really solid signal. And beyond that, it's just a extremely rapid CCD camera in some respects, in terms of being able to very quickly give you many, many measurements. I think I want to say 1,000 frames a second, or so, something on the order of that, the number of measurements that you're able to take with the thing. So another big data.
And just being able to being able to get that data back to the Earth is just amazing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of zeros in it, so to speak, too, right? I mean, there's a lot of just nothing. So there's probably a good data compression algorithm being run before it even gets off a spacecraft, is my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like there's a lot of excitement about, spotting, fire hot spots and smoke plumes before, we even get ground truth reports about them. So are algorithms taking care of that, or is it just going to take eyes on the ground spotting it in the imagery?
So imagers like VIIRS, like GOES imagers, the MODIS instrument, which Raytheon also built and has been flying on NASA satellites for a number of years. They've all got the bands, visible infrared bands in combination, that you can at least see where fires are happening. In the case of GOES, you can track them more rapidly. In the case of the polar orbiters, you typically have slightly better spatial resolution, so you can get finer and finer features on the Earth. VIIRS has a dedicated band actually for looking at fires. It'll be interesting to see what the Lightning Mapper can do with that. If you can take those measurements over time, and I think you can filter out to something that's more persistent, like a fire, then you can probably glean some additional information from that.
Yeah, that's just amazing. It sounded to me, I actually saw some research that related to changing the fire weather warning paradigm to, say, okay, to becoming more like the short fuse warning process that we use for severe convective storms. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're heading in that direction. Yeah, another interesting aspect with fires is how they feed back on the weather. Been talking to people about the decision support side of weather, taking all the data and trying to make a decision. So typically a meteorologist will get deployed to the field when there's a fire happening and try to track what's going on in the weather. But the fire itself can even create cumulonimbus clouds through the effects of convection. And so it's interesting how those things get coupled together.
You look at some of this imagery that's already available to us, and I know it's probably just scratching the surface, but you discern amazing patterns in the atmosphere boundaries and, cirrus level things that are happening, and the resolution of just the cumulus field is just amazing.
Yeah, it is. And as instruments like ABI and VIIRS go up with that higher resolution, we're going to be able to do a lot more at higher resolution with those types of features.
Yeah, I could imagine fog is probably a good possibility here too. Is it going to enhance our ability to detect fog?
Yeah, fog is one of those interesting things where if you're just looking in one band, it looks like everything else. So it's hard to tell oftentimes between, if you're just looking at a visible image, it's hard to tell snow from fog from a cirrus cloud, for example. But if you take multiple bands and put them together, and a lot of times that's what people will do for imagery, is they'll take 3 bands and put them into the red, green, and blue guns, so to speak, to give you a color image. And depending on what each of those bands are, you may have fog looks blue, snow looks green, higher clouds look red. And it's pretty amazing what you can discern when you put those different pieces of information together from multiple bands.
Yeah, that really is amazing. So in the time leading up to the satellite, we continue to hear the term the proving ground. What is the proving ground, and what is the role of that once the satellites are operational?
The idea of the proving grounds is to really just get the user community ready for the new data that they're going to be using, so that once the satellites are up, they don't have to spend as much time working through how to get those things into operations. So you'll see people taking data from previous instruments that are already up there, generating simulated data of what's going to go up next. And then you just route that data to the users. You test the communication systems, make sure they can handle the data load, and you test the user applications to see, can they get their new applications to use these new data in new ways and generate better, more accurate products to support forecasts or whatever else their end goal is.
And you were involved in risk reduction studies. Tell us what that means, Sean. What is a risk reduction study, and how does it relate to all this?
Risk reduction, typically for a program, but especially for programs as large as GOES-R or JPSS, because so much investment is being made of taxpayer dollars, and because the mission is so critical for protecting lives and property, you want to spend a lot of time engineering up front, so you've made the right decisions at each step of the way. Excuse me, and then you can be more confident. That's the basic tenet for risk reduction. Is you want to try to eliminate as many of the problems as potential problems as you can early on, because the farther down the line you discover a problem, the more expensive it is to fix, and the more likely it is it's going to impact your schedule for getting these new satellites up. And they're needed because they're designed well, but they don't last forever. So you got to be able to get the next generation up in time.
So, Sean, what are some practical applications that came to you during the proving ground process that showed practical reality for the satellite?
A lot of it came down from my perspective. A lot of my focus was more on the data aspects and understanding the volume of data that was going to be generated, which is actually not a trivial calculation.
I
And
bet.
then, what kind of compression can you apply to the data products to make it more manageable? Not, both to store it on disk locally and then transmitting it, but also without degrading the data. Which users need which data products and how can that be consolidated? Kind of understanding that whole perspective of the end game of these are all the data products that have to get to all these people. And that's the whole reason these satellites are going up. And so how do you best engineer that so it isn't cost prohibitive for one thing, but also to make sure that everybody's still getting the value that they need.
So, Sean, how are National Weather Service forecasters being trained? Are you following that process?
I don't really follow that particular process. I know there's a lot of great training material out there for just people in general to better understand, but I'm not as well plugged into the actual forecasters and their certification process and those types of things.
Yeah, I know there are great Comet modules. Are there any other things that come to mind where listeners could get training on the satellite and its products?
Comet is one of the things that sprung to mind for me when you asked that question, and I think that's a great resource just for the general community, understanding what you can do with the products. I think the JPSS and GOES-R home pages, respectively, I think are very, very good. And you can Google those pretty easily just based on the acronyms and maybe combine NOAA with that, and you should be able to zero in on the right page. But they've made a tremendous amount of progress. I remember early days, those websites were pretty fundamental and didn't provide a whole lot of guidance. And these days, they just seem to have a wealth of information and links and things that people can go to learn better how they can best use the data.
Hey, Sean, this is Brian. I'm just curious. We have a lot of people that listen to this show that are not meteorologists, and they have very little in the way of training. So I'm really curious. Could you kind of synthesize down a number that we could relate to as to exactly how much data is coming down from the satellite? I mean, I know it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good question. Let's start with the NPP satellite, which is up there today, and it looks a lot like what JPS-1 will look like when it gets launched. So NPP sends data down at a rate of around 150 megabits per second.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Holy mackerel!
That is basically the raw data from the instruments. That has to get communicated from the polar regions to the United States, where NOAA facility does the processing. And once you're done processing, at the end of the day, each day we send out around, once JPSS-1 goes up, it'll be around 10 terabytes per day of data products being delivered.
Good Lord. I'm sorry.
So you're
right.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was hoping we would understand these numbers, but they're so overwhelming.
I don't think I'm gonna be able to get those on my Commodore 64 at home.
No, I don't think so. Well, let me ask you a follow-up question to that. Is the 150 megabytes a limiting factor? Could you use more speed?
It drives, so on the spacecraft, it drives what kind of transmitter you need to get the data down to the ground. So NPP sends data down in the X band, for example, to be able to accommodate that. On the ground, it drives, you've got to get the data. To give you an example, when JPSS-1 goes up in September, it will eventually be downlinking its data twice per orbit. It takes about 100 minutes for JPSS to go around the Earth once. So every 50 minutes, you have to downlink the data. The data have to be in the hands of the users as products that they can do something with.
Right.
In 80 minutes from the time that they were first observed by the instruments. So for 50 of those minutes, the data may have been sitting on the spacecraft. And that leaves you only 30 once you get to the ground to move them from the polar regions out to southern or suburban Maryland, where they get processed, and then out to the users from that point. So that kind of gives you a sense of the sort of technology you have to use. You have to have high bandwidth communication lines, fiber, and then you have to have pretty intensive data processing capability
Yes.
to products out the door. And then you need to have high-speed communication to the users of the data so that they get their data products on time.
Wow. Thank you. I have a whole new appreciation for how much. I mean, I always thought it was a lot, but boy, that may be more than I realized it was.
You're going to have to upgrade that 9600 baud modem there.
I guess so.
Right.
Wow.
So Sean, that raises an interesting question in my mind. Touch on the potential changes as the FCC considers sharing that spectrum with other entities that you use to get that data down to the earth.
Yeah, there's an interesting sort of process going on right now with that. Obviously, with cellular communication and all the other devices that are using RF to transmit and receive and all these different applications, it's just going to get more crowded over time. And so there's an effort underway to look at auctioning off a portion of the spectrum that NOAA has had reserved for a number of years for GOES downlink. Now, what this is the downlink to direct broadcast users of GOES data. So when the GOES satellite sends data to NOAA, that's over a different communication path that isn't necessarily affected by this. But what happens is those data get processed and then they get sent back up to the satellite to be rebroadcast to all the users that aren't necessarily at NOAA facilities. So this could include weather forecast offices, universities doing research, just any number of users of the data. And the band in which those data are being sent down is the one that they're looking at potentially auctioning or having sharing between GOES downlink and, say, cellular communications. And so NOAA has been looking at this quite a bit. Industry has been looking at it to try to understand what the impacts are. The initial things that I have seen indicate that it's not trivial. There could be data loss for those users of the data, and some of those users are critical users. So it's an important issue that's being dealt with. It's being dealt with on the government side. Industry obviously is very interested in it. And at the AMS Washington Forum, we're actually going to have a session. One of our 90-minute sessions will be devoted to that topic and better understanding from the user perspectives what the impacts to them might be.
So that's a great segue, Sean. Talk about the AMS Washington Forum. What is it, and when is it, and what all will be going on?
The Washington Forum is a great event. It's one of I really see three main events from AMS each year: the annual meeting, the Washington Forum, and then the summer community meeting. Summer community meeting tends to be more internal to the community. How do we better communicate amongst ourselves? How do we better do our job? And the Washington Forum is more of an outlooking event where you have typically you will have leaders of federal agencies, congressional staffers. So you'll get input on where is policy going, and then you'll have industry looking for business opportunities associated with those policy changes. And you'll have public and academic sectors talking about, where's the science going? What are the needs for forecasting? How do we continue to make improvements in the forecasts for the American public? So it's a great combination of stakeholders in the weather and environmental enterprise. And it's a 3-day event. This year it's starting on Tuesday, May 2nd and going through May 4th. And it's pretty much all day, all 3 days. So we're packed with like 10 sessions, I think we have. I mentioned the spectrum session. There'll be a section devoted to congressional staffers and discussion with them. Federal agency leads from NOAA, NASA, NSF, I believe, and a couple other agencies. And then a wide range of topics relating to impacts of weather and climate, whether it's on insurance, transportation, flooding and emergency management associated with that, renewable energy, pretty much the entire gamut of things that weather intersects with in terms of other sectors in the economy. And so really looking forward to it. It's always a great event. We always get great speakers. We're going to have Earl Comstock will be a keynote speaker from the Department of Commerce on day one. There's a reception dinner the night of the first day where we'll have Congressman Bridenstine come and speak. And we'll have a whole bunch of great speakers in the sessions themselves as well. So very excited to be a part of this again this year.
So is it too late to register, too late to become a part of it, or what?
Absolutely not. You can register on site if you want to. I think the early registration deadline has passed, or it was either last Friday or this Friday. So
it's passed.
The price difference is not enormous. So it's still something worth considering if you've got the budget to travel out there, or if you're in the area to begin with. But yeah, we're still taking in new registrations. If people want to show up on site, they can do that there as well.
So this is more of a conversation and not a lobbying effort, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a conversation with policymakers, but it's also a conversation with the user community, and it's really cool to see. The best part is, each session typically has 3 or 4 people that speak for a few minutes about their take and their role in the enterprise. But then the whole second half of that session is really Q&A with the audience, and that's where the best discussion happens. And that's always the part I look forward to the most. So another interesting thing we'll be having this year that we hadn't had in years past is on the third day, May 4th, that evening, we'll have a public outreach event, which the Washington Post is actually helping us organize. And it'll start with, after the Washington Forum itself is over in the early to mid-afternoon, there will be some spotter training run by the Weather Service at that same building where we're having the event. And then that night we'll have a panel with several speakers. Let's see, Barry Myers will be there. Angela Fritz from the Washington Post will be moderating the session. Really good way to kind of cap off a great week with this event.
Well, it sounds really exciting. I'm very jealous that I'm not going to be able to attend. I have to put it on my calendar for next year.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we do it every year.
Now, well, it sounds like a great event. I can't wait to be there sometime. So, President Trump signed HR 353 into law recently, and this plays into that. This seems like a very prescient, given investments like the satellites. Talk about the significance of that act and what it means to us in the weather enterprise.
I'm really excited about it, and frankly, I was a little bit surprised that something bipartisan happened, this year. There hasn't been a whole lot of that so far, so it's nice to see. And Congress is for several years now, I feel like Congress has been pretty well educated on the importance of weather, and you can see that in the elements of the bill and the things it talks about, for tornadoes, for hurricanes, innovation, taking advantage of new commercial capabilities in observing systems and other parts of the weather enterprise. Just all kinds of aspects that show that they're listening to the community when we talk about what are the things that we need to keep doing moving forward for weather.
Well, that is just, that's really exciting. So how close did Barry Myers come to being the head of the Commerce Department?
I wish I had insight on those discussions. We've got, as do all companies, we've got a guy at Raytheon who's one of his main jobs is to be in on that stuff and go to transition meetings and things like that. And even he really, I think, there's a lot of things that he wasn't privy to in terms of how that process played out.
So Brian, James, any more science questions? I got 2 personal nosy questions for Sean after y'all ask any. So if your internet's going to go out, it'll be a good time after James and Brian finish here. Sean.
Exactly. I'm curious about the solar imaging capability with GOES 16, the solar ultraviolet imager, I think what it's called. I don't think people understand that the GOES 16 is actually going to monitor the sun as well. Tell us about that capability.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that. Space weather is something that I really geek out on. I don't really get to do it much as part of my job, but I just find it fascinating. And the GOES series have actually been tracking solar and space weather for years. There's several instruments. In fact, I think there's more instruments pointing at the sun than at the Earth on GOES-R. There's an imager, there's an X-ray ultraviolet instrument. There's a couple others that are more dedicated to particles and such, but the imager is pretty cool because kind of in the same way that ABI has a big advance over previous imagers for GOES, the SUVI, which is the solar ultraviolet imager, is a big advance over the previous X-ray imager that had been used to date. Space weather is something that people just aren't very aware of in general, but the effects of an event could be enormous.
I don't think people understand the geomagnetic storm potential that we have here, or the impacts it would have on our lives, everybody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. There was an event, I believe it was 1859, called the Carrington event, where there was such a solar storm that telegraph lines were able to run without their batteries and communicate. And there's actually records of people saying, are your batteries off or something like that? I can still hear you and all that. It's an amazing, and that just gives you a sense of what can happen below ground to magnetic and electromagnetic technology when a solar storm occurs. And we don't really understand, and generally, just even myself walking around, I forget how completely dependent we are on a global electrical grid. And so, an event that took out, for example, the grid on the eastern coast of the United States, what would that do? It would take down communications. People would lose Facebook.
That could be a good
that
thing.
may not be all bad.
Right. That would make people pay attention. But more fundamentally than that, while all that's happening, hospitals have lost their power, and emergency response units and all the infrastructure that we rely on, banks, so it's been measured, I think, in trillions in terms of the economic impact of even a similar event to what happened in the 1850s. And it's not a question of if, but that type of an event is going to happen again at some point. We don't know if it's going to be next year or 100 years from now, but right now we're very ill prepared because the system wouldn't be able to handle the kind of current that would be induced by something like that. So
what type of protection mechanism does GOES 16 have to protect itself from that?
In geostationary orbit, you're a lot higher than in polar orbit, and so you're much less protected by what little atmosphere there is or magnetic field protection that the Earth offers. So you have to go through a lot of extra care with the electronics. They have to be much more radiation hardened, as they call it. I'm not personally familiar with the technology that goes into that beyond just knowing that it's a lot more expensive, and it needs to hold up, obviously, over a long period of time because you're going to get bombarded by radiation when you're that high.
And finally, I have a very important question. When can we show the GOES 16 data without saying NOAA's GOES 16 satellite has not been declared operational and its data are preliminary and undergoing testing?
Well, I wish I had insight into that as well. I know, especially, like I said, with a new satellite, there's a lot more conservative nature in terms of being willing to say that something is operational. The truth is, the data start flowing, and I think agencies start to use them. And that's really, I think, what pushes the process along, is people find applications for them and they just start using them. And that kind of ends up backing into being able to say with confidence that, yeah, these are working. A lot of it comes down to being able to, feed the data into global weather models and see if there is an improvement in the accuracy of the forecast. And I think once you start seeing that consistently, people will be a lot more confident to say that it's ready to be operational. But I've worked with a lot of the people that make those decisions, and they care very much about making sure that they got it right before they're willing to say anything final like that about it.
Hey, Sean, this is Brian again. Sorry about the voice. Just curious, you read almost every day. It seems like somebody's launching something into outer space. And we've got the government satellites out there too. So there's a lot of stuff out there. How big is the risk that some of that junk's going to collide with operational satellites? The dead stuff going to collide with the live stuff.
It's bigger and bigger all the time.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. Well, so when I was in college, go ahead and let you guys do some math. When I was in college in the 80s, I took a class, one of my undergrad classes, and we devoted a couple of weeks to the topic of space debris, which at the time was already considered a oh no kind of subject. Like, wow, this is really building, and now here we are, a few decades later, and there's been many launches in between then and now.
Yeah,
there's certainly a lot of small sats going up. I'm not sure about the threat from those so much because they tend to have a limited lifespan. That's part of the point, is they're very inexpensive to launch, and so you just kind of recycle them. And you may not even send them up as high as you have some of the other ones, because you don't care if they come back down and burn up. And they're pretty small, so they will probably burn up without hitting anything. The bigger concern has got to be in the more traditional orbit slots, where there's still a lot of more countries that want to get involved in that. And especially if we don't know about the satellites. For example, there was a few years ago, working on NPP, we had a case where we lost track on a satellite we were communicating with, the NPP satellite, and drifted over to another one that was a Chinese satellite that we didn't know had been launched because it wasn't in the database that we use for those types of things. And so there's all the satellites you know about, and then there's all the satellites you don't know about. And then, as you say, there's just the debris, right? Which, the little tiny BB-sized object can take out a satellite because it's traveling over 10,000 miles an hour when it hits. And so it's definitely a growing concern. And the Air Force has been charged traditionally with tracking all the objects that are up there and maintaining a hold on that. And I think they've got a pretty good system in place for that. But again, they have to know about the object in order to be able to track it, and that's where the difficulty comes in.
Yeah. So I guess it's just what do they call it? Everybody has to be honest about their satellites so that we really know how much stuff is up there.
Yeah. It requires some cooperation.
So are there any treaties that govern that, Sean?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what sort of international agreements are up there, right? But of course, a country has to agree to be part of that, and then B, actually have to follow the rules if they are part of it. And so, again, you got a couple factors there that may not guarantee that you'll know about everything that's up there. The other problem is, especially like for the weather satellites, we've gotten very used to a particular orbit, a polar orbiting. Say crosses the equator at 1:30 in the afternoon and it flies around 700 or 800 kilometers above the ground. There's a lot of satellites in that type of an orbit, and there's reasons for that. And so you're going to get more and more. So it's kind of like, you wonder, why would two airplanes ever collide? Well, it's because they always get routed into the same, general paths to get from one place to another. And it's very similar in space. And so there's not as much space as you would like to do the things that we need to do.
So, Sean, in the absence of any more important questions, because you've answered about 1 million tonight, how did you originally decide to pursue this career?
I was very lucky in terms of, when I was a little kid, like a lot of little kids, I was interested in space. I was a big Star Trek fan. I was interested in sensing planets. And so, you know, I got into high school and I went into math and science because of that. And then in college, I gravitated towards aerospace engineering because of it. And I really, though, didn't know what I wanted to do in aerospace until my senior year. And it was a class on remote sensing that I took, which is basically, you know, using satellites and instruments on board them to determine whatever. And my project was related to watching cumulonimbus clouds develop into storms using visible and infrared imagery. And I just got hooked on it and realized at that point, okay, this is what I want to do. I also wasn't ready to go get a real job, so I stayed in college and went to grad school and just kept on going through it. Next thing you know, the nice thing there was that was at CU Boulder. And they have a really good tie between their aerospace engineering department and the more of the physics side, you know, of the atmosphere and things like that. And so I was able to get exposure to some of the science behind what you're trying to observe in addition to the engineering about how you observe it. And that's really how I ended up in it. And then, you know, Raytheon was hiring at just the right time. And for me, the rest was history.
Well, that's really cool. So my last question of the night, and then Brian or James can ask anything they want to ask. But from what I understand, you enjoy hockey and beer. What's your favorite team, favorite label?
Well, unfortunately, my favorite team is the Avalanche. They haven't had very good couple years. Right behind that, though, is the University of Denver, who just won the national championship, which I got to see in person. So that was pretty fun. My favorite label, I have a very wide range of taste in that regard. I'll probably have to say Guinness, though. That's if I ever have to pick just one that I'm going to go back to, that's probably the one.
You know, Brian drinks a lot of Schlitz. You don't hear people drinking that anymore. Brian, you still drinking that stuff?
They still make that.
It's still out there, so somebody's drinking it.
Yeah.
In hockey, goodness, I've not been to what do you call them, a match or a game? I like the fights and the guys beating on the glass and everything. I mean, it's kind of a circus atmosphere, but I hadn't been to one of these things in a long time. But when does the season
end?
That
was the WHA. It went out in the 70s, James.
Yeah, there's still quite a bit of that now. A little less in the playoffs because the penalties can be harmful to winning at that point. I play in beer league, and so there's a lot of violence, but it's unintentional. People don't know how to skate, and they run into each other or fall down.
So will Ovechkin be one of the greatest hockey players of all time?
He's got to be right up there. I think he's always going to carry an asterisk if he doesn't win a cup, which is unfortunate, but that's how the perception goes. So they seem to be having a little bit of struggle this year. They got out of the first round, but had more trouble than people were expecting them to. So we'll see if they can get past the second one.
Awesome. Well, Sean, you have given us an hour of your time, and you're so kind to do that. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, have you got like a Twitter or Facebook account?
I'm on Twitter, but I don't really do anything with it. Just more kind of follow sports with Twitter. I am on Facebook.
Well, we'll put a link to your AMS profile. How about that? That's
probably the best thing to do because that'll kind of lead you to how to email me and things like that. So
awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to be on the show this week. We do greatly appreciate it. How's the weather in Colorado?
It was actually pretty nice today. Got up to the high 60s. Went out for a walk for lunch, and yeah, it's pretty nice. I think we're kind of slowly cruising into summertime here. So.
Okay, awesome. Good deal. Well, quit sending us these troughs from out there, okay? You send us the troughs. We deal with severe weather down here. So anyway, Sean, have a great week and appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sean.
We're going to take a break here. We're going to hit, let's see, Professor Peters, you got no voice, but I got Tony Rice in the astronomy report. We'll come back with the weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Last week, the Cassini probe began the final phase in its nearly 20 years of exploring Saturn and its moons. Dubbed the grand finale, Cassini will undertake a daring set of orbits through September that are like a whole new mission. It will skirt the inner edge of those rings, and other times it'll skirt the outer edge of the atmosphere itself. Finally, the spacecraft will get up close and personal with that atmosphere on September 15th when it plunges in, sending data back up to the fiery end as it burns up like a meteor. The Cassini probe is a 6.7 meter by 4 meter science machine. The instruments aboard include spectrometers, which cover infrared, ultraviolet, and visual ranges, radars, as well as plasma and dust analyzers, and a magnetometer. When launched from Cape Canaveral back in 1997, the plutonium-238 and its 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators were cranking out 885 watts of power for those instruments. But by mission's end, that will be reduced down to 633 watts. But that's not why the mission's coming to an end. After nearly 7 years en route and 13 plus years at Saturn, Cassini is running out of fuel. More than half the mass of that probe on launch day was hypergolic fuel for its RD-4D rocket engines. Originally designed for the Apollo lunar landers, those engines are still in use on Japanese and European cargo vessels visiting the International Space Station today. Cassini's tag-along probe, the Huygens, provided the first in-situ measurements of the atmosphere on Saturn's largest moon, Titan. It revealed the nitrogen-rich stratosphere, the only other one in the solar system outside Earth's. Titan continued to reveal itself as the only other place in the solar system with stable liquid on its surface. Yes, it does rain on Titan, and it results in rivers and lakes and seas, but they're all composed of methane. Cassini was there in 2010 to watch Saturn's relatively tranquil atmosphere be overtaken by a planet-encircling storm. It behaves much like a hurricane here on Earth, but this one was fueled by a sudden 150-degree Fahrenheit temperature spike in the stratosphere. But as the head of this 190,000-mile-wide storm reached its tail, the whole storm sputtered out. Fantastic images have been captured of Saturn's polar regions, including a long-lived hexagonal-shaped polar vortex in the north, and more hurricane-like storms at both poles. The driving forces of each still remains a mystery, though. So, over the next few months, keep an eye and an ear out for more from this mission as it completes the grand finale.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Weather roundup for April 24th, 2017. You know, Brian, we're coming up on the 6th anniversary of the big tornado outbreak down here.
Yes.
April 27th, 2011. And the anniversary is Thursday of this week. So this tends to be a time where things tend to shake and bake a little bit. And by the way, Bill Murray just hung up on us, so it's down to me and you, buddy.
I didn't notice that. Sorry about that. Wow.
Yeah. So no, Bill said he had to go to work on a presentation. For those that don't know, and look, longtime listeners know this. We all have like real jobs, and we oftentimes have to attend to the actual things that kind of pay the bills. So Bill's got to attend to something. He's out in Oklahoma, and you know me, I always have to go across the hall when the news starts over here. But anyway. No, we're getting set for this anniversary, but we got flooding going on. Looks like up in North Carolina and Virginia. It almost looks like a tropical system's getting pulled into this thing that came out of the Bahamas. It almost looked like a warm core kind of thing coming up in there. So nasty flooding going on there.
And we had Arlene already.
Yeah, well, between now and the last show, we've had our first tropical storm of the season. Or preseason here in April. Arlene affected, well, let me put it this way. There were billions of fish in the path. Now, this was out in the Atlantic way between the east coast of the United States and the Azores. And the Hurricane Center believed it acquired warm core characteristics. And for about 18 hours, it was a tropical storm?
Yeah, it was close to a day, yeah.
Okay, and it got absorbed by this big, non-tropical circulation up in the North Atlantic. But we'll see. And I tell people all the time, because you've got a preseason system in April doesn't necessarily mean the hurricane season is going to be horrible.
Didn't we have one last year too, like in January?
I think we did. We did.
The hurricane season wasn't really all that
right.
terrible.
It was kind of routine, I guess. And this year it seems like everybody's thinking the El Nino is coming back, and that might limit the number of tropical storms and hurricanes. But we'll deal with that next month. This is April. We're still in the middle of tornado season here. And Brian, I've already seen buzz in the weather talk forums about this system at the end of this week.
Oh, yes.
Anytime the SPC guys put up risks beyond day, I'd say 4, that's when everybody starts buzzing here.
And not only did they do it beyond day 4, they did it like for 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, let me share this thing here. This is what you're looking at if you're watching the video version here. This is day 5, and this would be Friday, April 28th. And they've already got a 30% ring up in here, which often people just think that guarantees a moderate or a high risk, and it doesn't. But again, they've got a 30% ring covering really Oklahoma City over toward Fort Smith and Little Rock. And so that's day 5. This is day 6, and that is Saturday, April 29th, a risk from about Dallas-Fort Worth up into southern Missouri. And then on day 7,
our backyard, just about.
Yeah, that's Sunday, April 30th, a risk for Memphis and Jackson and the Interstate 55 corridor, and looks like about 80, 100 miles either side of that. So, and, look, this is when this stuff happens, late April, early May. So just something to watch, and looks like it will be a very active period for convection down here across the deep south. So that's basically the bottom line with the weather roundup. And again, we had an interesting case study, Brian. Again, I wrote this essay. I probably should have made it my pick of the week. I'll maybe do that next week. But we had a small EF1 short-lived tornado that touched down.
Yep.
And everybody screamed, we got no warning. And in a sense, there's some truth to that, and that the tornado warning was issued during the 4-mile journey this thing was down, a few minutes before it dissipated. The warning that was in effect well before it got down was a severe thunderstorm warning. And what I've said over and over and over, and people might disagree with me, but in my opinion, we're not really good enough to provide warnings for EF0 and EF1 tornadoes on a regular basis. We're just not. We're not that good. It's like I say all the time, it's whack-a-mole. And by the time a warning goes out, the tornado's gone, and it's just a challenge. And some people say if you see a mesocyclone, up within a storm on radar, you ought to issue a tornado warning. Well, goodness gracious, Brian, how many?
We'd be under almost a continuous tornado warning during almost any severe weather episode.
Yeah, in the false alarm ratio at Sky to 95%, and nobody would listen to tornado warnings because of the cry wolf syndrome. So you can't do that. And you get a TDS on the dual pole data, and sure, you got to issue a warning when you see that, but by the time it's all distributed, it's all gone. And that's what basically happened Saturday night. So it was just a struggle.
I looked at the Jackson and Birmingham soundings that morning. Those soundings were just not at all what you would look for to expect any tornadoes. They just weren't.
Right. And that is, again, we need to let people know that, quite frankly, there's a lot of things we don't understand about severe local convective storms. There's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of things we can't do. And we don't know a lot about tornadogenesis. We know some stuff, but we don't know a lot of stuff. And on that day, there was no tornado watch. There was a severe thunderstorm watch. And my quote in my writing leading up to the event, the tornado risk is very, very low. Right. And I'll raise my hand. That was wrong. And again, SPC, the guys out there, the best in the business, they put up a severe thunderstorm watch. We wound up with 2 small tornadoes, short-lived tornadoes in the state. So,
but it was interesting to watch those thunderstorms that producing the tornadoes. That was a right turner.
Yeah,
that was I mean, it was just so obvious when you were watching the radar data.
No, you watch a loop and it was a clear right turner.
Yeah.
And
I'm so happy that your head has not exploded, James. After Rick Smith's note about the latest experimental severe weather index, I told him that he should be looking for an explosion in the eastern sky because I was sure that your head would explode the minute you read that.
Oh yeah. I didn't even open it. I don't know who's doing it. I just don't want to go down that path. I mean, because I'm so tired. I just need my head to stay together for tonight. So, yeah. But anyway, back on this thing Saturday, I think what we need to do is communicate that we're not good with EF0 and EF1 tornadoes. Most of them will touch down during a severe thunderstorm warning. And there was a severe thunderstorm warning issued a half hour before this thing touched down. And in the text of the message, it said a tornado is possible. And I think people need to be taught that. And that goes back on us. It's on our back. We have to do a better job of educating people. And then the other thing I'm starting to learn is that people really don't understand how storm-based warnings work. They're still thinking that warnings are issued for entire counties. And they're not. They're issued for small segments of counties within a polygon. And what happens if somebody's in a county and they don't hear their app going off or a siren or whatever, they think, well, there's something wrong here. But in many cases where the system is on the storm-based system, then they shouldn't be hearing anything. And we've got to do a better job of that. If you look at like some of these weather radio apps and you get all these negative comments, is people don't understand how polygon warnings work. Well, I'm in this county and there was a warning for the county and I didn't get it. Well, you're not supposed to. You're not in the polygon.
Right.
So again, it goes back on us. We got to do a better job of educating people as to how that polygon system, the storm-based system, works. And we've all got some work to do. We've all got, but that was the whole point. We've all got some work to do. And this was just a good case study.
About 6 or 8 months ago, I started including, because of that problem, I started including in my severe weather talks an explanation of the polygon.
Oh, really?
Trying to, it's only, I mean, I don't talk to that many people, but in a small way, trying to communicate with some people about what it is. And Alabama Power is really good about having me at a lot of their safety meetings. And that's one of the places I've been trying to explain about the polygon warnings. So I hope it will, work its way in, but it's a lot of people out there and you can't get to all of them.
Yeah, and I got some, and it's very interesting. It is a very interesting social science study to read the comments after the essay. Again, I posted on Facebook, and people posted comments on Facebook. One guy said, "Well, this new warning system sucks. People can't understand it. You need to go back to counties. Better safe than sorry. It needs to be done by counties." And the problem if you do that, tornadoes, even a strong, violent EF4, EF5 tornado, it's tiny compared to an entire county.
Yes.
If you warn an entire county, you overwarn every time. And we know without a doubt in our mind that if people hear warning after warning after warning after warning and nothing ever happens, they're not going to do anything. Cry wolf. And that's going to get people killed. And the storm-based system, it's really not that hard. Just understand, we don't need to warn for an entire county. And the first thing I try and do on television is show the polygon. These are people that are in, and if you're in it, you respect it and you do something. And if you're not in it, don't worry about it. So,
right. I'm with you.
We got to do a better job of educating people about that. So, but yeah, and what we're going to do, Aubrey is out tonight. What was your excuse? Did you make her mad, Brian? Or
no, family. She has
family. Okay, family. We actually do have lives away from this, believe it or not. But we'll come back and do a longer email segment next week. Yeah. Well,
sometimes I wonder.
Yeah, goodness. I mean, it is. I think I honestly think some older people on the street still think when we're working a TV shift, we literally work, let's see, 8 minutes a day. We come on TV at 4. On my shift, we come on at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. We get 2 minutes for each show. 4 times 2, we work 8 minutes and we go home. They have no earthly idea what goes on here. And some mornings, Brian, we have to get up, before 4 o'clock to do the production in the morning to get out and do the stuff we have to do during the day.
Yes.
That's
why I was glad for Bill this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, this stuff, you have to produce video, edit video, write long blog posts, work social media, and it just doesn't stop. Like this morning, I started at 4:30, went and did a school, out in the country. And listen, and then that's the other thing I in that essay I wrote, it's this idea that we don't take care of rural people. Lord have mercy. If you've heard me speak in the last 6 years anywhere, the first thing I talk about is how people that live in rural areas are discriminated against, and we're not going to let that happen on our watch here. We treat a tornado warning for a rural area exactly the same as the city, an urban area. It doesn't matter to me, and it's the way it works here. If there's a tornado warning 80 miles away in a small county with low population in 2 diaries, I don't care. We're going to cover up whatever's on TV, just like we'd cover it up for a big city. That's the way it works here. And it's that people, they just think it's this rural thing. Well, I'm in a rural school almost every day. And so you do the production, you go to the school. I come back, I'm trying to work out here. So I got this midday workout. Then after that, I had to go actually to the Apple store down here and get my wife's cracked screen fixed. But tomorrow I'm going to get up early, probably before 5 again. Got to go to the Honda manufacturing plant, which is this big production facility here, and helping them with a program. And then I'm going to a school after that in the other part of the state. And it's a very long, challenging day. And if you like weather, it's the greatest job in the world. If you love weather. But if you don't, it would be the greatest nightmare because you don't sleep. You're like a pinball in a pinball machine, and there are days where you don't even have time to think. So, but again, I still love coming to work every day. I love everything I do. It's just fascinating. You learn something every day, so it's kind of cool. But since it's me and you, man, I got nobody else. Just me and you. We got to wrap this thing up here because I got to dress and go do some TV. Speaking of all that, WeatherBrains is typically done Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. And many people that watch us live, they're at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. We have a YouTube version, video version, and, of course, the podcast version. The email for all of us, it is email@weatherbrains.com. You send that out. It goes to all of us. We try and read as many as we can on the air when Aubrey's here. And all of our social media accounts are up on the website as well. And listen, if you listen by iTunes by chance, the Apple infrastructure, we love to get those comments, good, bad, whatever. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks a lot for listening.
Which is just me.
Yeah, I was about to say. The crew of 2, ladies and gentlemen. We are the troopers, Brian. We made it, man. Had a long weekend. We're here. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Have a marvelous week, and God bless.
Good night, James.
Hit the post. There we go. Hey, man, thanks for being a trooper. We'll see you. See you next week. Bye.
All right. Or early.